as I said, the issue module. That's our enterprise repository for all issues across the company. So, any issue coming from any source, right? First line, second line, third line, which is internal audit, incidents, or issues stemming from incidents, regulatory issues, everything goes into MetricStream Issue Management module. And then we have a process that we launched recently, which is on the right-hand side here, that process flow, to get your, to actually have people submit their issues directly into MetricStream. Previously, it was a very single flow process where issues would come to one group and the group would do the data entry work, but we kind of started to federate the data entry across folks across the organization, which is actually the way it was intended to be with the way MetricStream issue management is designed. So let's talk a little more about reporting, right? This is the reason we're all here. And I wanted to go into more of the 5 W's, right? The who, what, when, where, why. So first off, why do we actually want to report on issue management? I think fundamentally the main reason really is to be able to provide a more transparency really to anyone. I mean, you're talking about senior management, boards, committees, right? Around what is our exposure to risk across the company, right? So simply by asking, well, how many open issues do we have? That's a good start. But more than that, how many open issues do we have by severity, right? Do we have a lot of highs versus moderates versus lows? What's that composition like? I mean, those are some of the questions to start understanding your level of risk exposure. There's a lot of other metrics, by the way, but by and large, having an enterprise issue repository definitely enables us to get this question, or a little bit of this question answered. We have a lot of folks that we report to. This is pretty much the gamut. We send reporting to regulators as well as everyone else internally. Let's talk about, this is the meat, let's talk about the actual reports. So we've got one set of reports which is monthly, and the audience for this is really everybody across the company. We send it out to not only senior management but line level managers as well. Our monthly report is actually I'll call it a paginated or paginated report. And what I mean by that is it's actually a PDF that my team puts together and we send out on a monthly basis. We use data from MetricStream's issue management tool to source the actual information. And like I mentioned, the frequency, it's monthly. But now I'm going to dive into some of the key items or key things that we actually report on. So we talked about KPIs in the beginning. Yes, sure. Yep. So gentleman asked, what are we using for the visualization? So our monthly report is built in Cognos. That's the tool. It's a BI tool. Yeah, you'll find, and I have a slide a little later on talking a little more about the BI tools. Yeah, we're good. Yeah. So yeah, it's Cognos is a BI tool that we use, developed by or owned by IBM now, and that's what we use for our monthly paginated reports because Cognos is able to deliver on pixel-perfect reporting. So you really want a report that you can print, and it will look exactly the same as it will on screen. And so that's what we found this to be helpful with. So we were talking about KPIs, right? Key performance indicators. And actually, we report these metrics, and I'll kind of walk through them a little bit, but we report these metrics on a monthly basis, and they do get aggregated up to our management committee level. And it's actually, some of these are used as part of the performance and compensation discussions at the management committee level. So it's pretty powerful when everyone at the senior level is talking about these and focusing on them. And in fact, one of the things I will say is just by virtue of reporting how we're doing as an organization, this is at a company level on these metrics. We've definitely seen, at least maybe that's one of the contributors I like to think, is we've seen folks actually hit our metrics or hit our targets, if you will. So we've got targets for some of them, and we've seen, most of our metrics actually we meet, we either achieve or exceed our targets. Exceed in a good way, I mean. So, any questions? Okay. So yes. Good question. So, Just for everyone in the room, benefit validated actions means, when you submit an action, we actually have one of the control functions be the approver on the action. And so they could look at the evidence that you've submitted and say yes or no. You've either done what you said you were going to do in the action, or you haven't achieved that. The way we track it, though, is we actually added 2 fields to the action in MetricStream. And those fields are, one is, is this a failed validation, yes or no? And the other one is, when did it fail, if it did. And so anytime the action failed the validation, we would update those 2 fields and pull that into the reporting. Sure.
Did you add the fields in the issue form for the final approver to submit it back, or did you add it for the action approver to send it back?
We added the fields of the action on the action form, but as far as the customization goes, right, because it is a customization, we didn't make it editable by anyone on the workflow. It was restricted to be something that we can edit. Whoever has the audit administrator role can edit it. So we have a tool that we can use to then edit the data. So just purely from a data integrity standpoint, it made sense to centralize that. So the top metrics that you see above, sort of the top section of metrics, are kind of more of the performance indicators or KPIs. We look at issues that remediate on time. So it's simple, right? When did you say you were going to remediate an issue or complete the remediation? And did you achieve that, yes or no? Second one is expected speed of remediation. So at a management level, there was a focus to say we want to remediate issues within 180 days of creating them. You don't want long-tailed issues that take a year to remediate, because by then, the landscape has changed. What the actual risk might have changed, or it doesn't exist anymore. So we're measuring at the time of creating the issue, what is the issue owner's intention, right? Is their intention to remediate within 180 days? And that's what we're rewarding them on. Because if they don't, we've got them on the first metric anyway. This is all a game of like gotcha. Like, I'm going to play whack-a-mole with, I'm going to flag you on something or the other, right? So if they don't remediate within 180 days, we've got them on the first one already, because you intended to remediate by, let's say, tomorrow, but you actually made it by 3 days from now, and we're going to get you on the first metric. So that's the expected speed. We also look at repeat issues. So this is where every time we have an issue that's logged, we do an analysis of, did this issue occur previously, right? So is it a repeat of a prior issue? And there's some research that goes into that. And so we report as an organization how many, or what percentage of our issues are actually repeats. And we have a pretty low threshold for that, because the intention is, if you resolve something, you got to do it right the first time, right? You don't want repeats. So it's a very low bar, or a very high bar that we set for tolerance on repeat issues. Yes? Sure. Mm-hmm.
Question about the remediation timeframes. Do you adjust the remediation timeframe based on a perceived or calculated risk level of the issue, like expedient issues versus less urgent issues?
We do. So our severity levels are severe, high, moderate, and low. And based on the severity, so if it's a severe issue, by and large, we look for 180-day remediation, but if it's a severe issue, I think based on management's discretion, we might actually push for a faster remediation time frame. Yeah. Because nobody wants to see a severe issue sitting on the books for 180 days. We also have, and you'll see that in one of the charts that I'll present next, is we have a risk rating reduction program. So what happens is, as you have, let's say, a severe rated issue, as you perform some remediating actions, you might have a point where you hit say, you know what, I've done the bulk of the work to remediate the risk here. Can we reduce the risk from a severe to high? And we actively kind of manage that. Yeah. And we actually report out on that as well. All right, the actual speed of remediation is exactly what it is. You've got expected and you've got actuals. So hopefully it's pretty straightforward. And then the completion on time is actually, so the second two after the actual speed, those are the action level, which is, did we complete an action on time? Right, the first one, the actual speed was, the remediation on time was, did we complete the issue on time? And then the completed on time one is, did we complete the action on time? So it's just measuring at issue and action level. And then validated actions, we already talked about when the gentleman asked the question. The bottom part is we actually give a breakout of the issues that we have by source. It's just good to see, I think our intention is to have, and maybe with all of you, is to have more management-sourced issues, right? You really want management to be able to raise and self-identify issues more frequently. And fortunately, I would say we are moving in that direction. Whereas with, you want to see less, you definitely don't want to see any issues coming from regulators, but, that happens. We can't avoid that. And then, we have issues coming from audit as well. This is so part of the same paginated report. We've got an issues dashboard. So I'll just run through this, but I think the key one that I wanted to kind of point out was the top middle panel is the one I mentioned around risk rating reduction. So we just kind of seen within the last month how many risk ratings or reductions did we have. So what was the original, what's the current, and we just kind of do a quick count of that. But if you go kind of from the top left to the bottom right, so top left is number of issues created and remediated, risk rating reduction. The far right is the number of open issues that we have. And then the bottom left here is the issues by target remediation date, so by the quarter that they're expected to remediate in, and we've also stratified that by the various issue ratings. So, consistent color scheme, right? Severe, moderate, or severe, high, moderate, low have similar colors. The middle bottom is the age of the issues in days, right? So we bucket it by age. And the bottom right is we actually have a risk acceptance program as well. So if we raise an issue and management decides, hey, we can't really remediate this issue, we're going to accept the risk instead, we report on accepted risks as well, just by count at this point. Similar reporting at the actions level, right? So just open closed actions. I won't spend too much time on this, but looking at actions by when they're supposed to be completed, retargets, and how many past dues we have. I mentioned, we report the KPIs at a company level. We also give an organization level breakdown. So this is where it kind of gets very, very powerful, because each organization has their breakdowns of how they're performing the enterprise, to the enterprise metrics. And so if you see that, hey, we're kind of not really doing so well as an organization, there's a lot of push to kind of improve your metrics at each organization level. This is just an appendix, if you will, to this monthly report. It's literally an extract or a dump of all the data around the issues. I put it here just for a reason, because we know we have the list reports in MetricStream, right, that you can use to get all of this. But noting that some of these reports do go to regulators, so this is the way we provide the details to our regulators. So that's it with our monthly reporting. Yes. For an right, so our monthly report, we don't really have kind of a drill down per se, because it is a very static report. This is actually probably the self-services where we get into more of the drill downs to get more information. And this is actually the direction we're sort of trying to head in, is more self-service, less of a push, more of a pull type of model where you can pull down the reports as you need to. So from a tooling standpoint, if you're interested, this was all built in Power BI. And I'll get into that a little later if you'd like to talk about that. But these reports, I love these because these are self-service, they're interactive, right? So as a user, you can go in and you can get into these reports anytime you want, day or night, without having to worry about the data being stale. The top one that we'll go into is around the remediation of issues, and the bottom one is around managing your actions portfolio. So let's talk about issue remediation real quick. This is a fairly new dashboard that we launched recently, and the audience for this is primarily mostly senior management across the firm, because at DTCC, the issue owners can be only officers of the company can be issue owners, and so by nature, they needed a place to be able to say, what does my open issue portfolio look like? And so this was actually built for that purpose. A lot of filters on the left-hand side, including looking at the issue portfolio by organization, right, that owns the issue. You've got some very basic things here, but still pretty powerful. So the top left chart is looking at the issues by risk. Right? So very similar things to what you saw in the paginated report, except this is updated, or this refreshes on a nightly basis, so you can kind of get a very near real-time view of what your open issue portfolio looks like. The bottom left is looking at the expected age of remediation of issues across the company. So it kind of partners with the metric I talked about, the KPI I talked about earlier, right? When you're interested in understanding when do you expect your issue to be remediated, well, this chart will also tell you on a real-time basis how you're doing against that. The bottom panel here is the drill down details that the gentleman asked. What we've done here is, I don't think it's quite visible, but, oh yeah, it is actually. If you're looking at the bottom panel, and you train your eye on the leftmost side of it, you'll see a little link icon. So we actually deep linked each of these issues straight back to MetricStream. So you can click on that link, and this was actually one of the most requested features was, I don't want to now navigate to MetricStream and hunt down an issue ID, right? But you can click on that link and it opens up MetricStream and you're right at the issue itself. So that was a nice kind of add-on that we were able to achieve. Let's talk about the issue and action management part of it. So that was the issue remediation, right? Look at how you're resolving your issues. But now, what does the open action portfolio look like? And we have, at DTCC, mostly the control functions sort of, I should say, manage or we handhold a little bit the action owners, right? To say, hey, you've got something coming due, please make sure you're submitting it on time. And so this is a self-service equivalent of our action management dashboards. So really here we're just looking at open actions, and we've just summarized them by the action approvers, right? So if you are a validator or an approver of an action, you can come in here, you can look at your name real quick and say, okay, this is how many I have that are coming down the pipe for me to look at. The right side graph or bar chart shows the actions by owner, right? So who do I need to call in order to understand more about these actions? And unfortunately, what you don't see here is really the interactivity, right? So if I was to click on, let's say, that first green bar on the left-hand side, the right side would filter automatically and show you only the actions that are pertinent to what's on the left side. So I couldn't bring the interactivity here, but that's the intention here, is really to be able to automatically and quickly filter your data sets. This is actually Power BI. It's built in Power BI. Right.
People are accessing Power BI
Correct.
through the web or through your internet.
Correct. They're accessing Power BI through the web.
Okay.
Yes.
So you have to maintain an enterprise license for that.
Yes. So I believe there's various licensing terms, but with Microsoft, you would have to have that licensing with Power BI or to be able to use Power BI.
Okay. So it's a Microsoft product.
Yes.
But you could use Tableau, or you
Absolutely.
could use
So
ClickView.
I'll talk about it. Yeah, you could bring your own. You bring your own tool. That's really all it is. We use Power BI because that was the recommendation we were given. But absolutely, Power BI, Tableau, Spotfire, ClickView, you name it. Whatever you prefer. The key is that we are using a third-party tool and not actually developing the reporting in MetricStream, because our view is that MetricStream is a specialty tool to house the data, have all the workflows, right? Reporting, there are other sort of best-of-breed vendors that are more in the business intelligence space. Data is the data. Be able to report it in a way that's easy to understand, flexible, etc. That's why we ended up or decided to go with a separate tool. Exactly. Yep. Absolutely. Any other questions? Yes.
So for example, right, if you've got different areas, so you're saying the first line of defense is logging the issues, you might have a regulator, they might all be logging the same issue that's come up. From a data integrity, a volume perspective, how do you manage that piece on the back end so that when someone pulls a report, they don't see that an area has 12 new issues, maybe it's just one instance?
It's a good question. So our issue creation process, if you will, the workflow that I sort of alluded to on the first or second slide, involves an approval process. And the approvers there are, for any issue today at DTCC, you actually have to go through internal audits approval. So we have audit directors for each of the lines of businesses. And based on where the issue's stemming from, that director is involved. And they've got the history and the knowledge of all the open issues or closed issues of the organization or for that team, so they basically can push back and say, you've already raised this before.
So so you also had on there then who, like the source of the issue. So in that type of a situation, when multiple people are reporting, what's the default source then? Is it who identified the issue?
So the source is usually, I think what we tend to lean on is it a particular group's policy that's being violated, and that's an exception. So if that's the case, if there was like multiple people raising it, that would potentially be the source, because ultimately how we tie sources to what's the group that's going to then validate that the issue's been remediated. That's really they correlate. Otherwise, it's oftentimes we'll have whatever group is actually doing the testing that raised the issue. That tends to be the source. We haven't seen too many cases where multiple sources are kind of raising the same issue, because oftentimes the issue owners will raise their hand and say, hey, this was already identified by audit. You can't slam me twice, right? So that happens quite a bit. So I think that's a nice natural control. But yeah, if it does happen, then we've got that as a fallback. Right. Good. So one last one around self-service is this is looking at now the other side of actions, right? Once the actions are submitted, you've got a book of work. At least so this is on the action approvers. They've got a book of work, right? Because now they've got to actually go through and review the actions and the evidence that was submitted, and then do all the approvals of those. And so this is just a dashboard to help them manage their work. And it's stratified by the age of the actions, when they were submitted, and how old they are. So you obviously don't want to have any reds showing up, right? So that way you know that you validated actions in a timely manner. But sometimes there are, for numerous reasons, right? Maybe sometimes you don't have, and actually we have reasons up top on the right for some of these actions that go over a certain period. For example, maybe you don't have enough of a sample size to be able to validate that the action was remediated, right? So you need to wait for a year or whatever it is for samples to accumulate. So that's it on self-service. And then lastly, I just wanted to touch upon this, but we do have some reports out of MetricStream, right? And this is, if you guys have used issue management in MetricStream, this is largely out of the box. We haven't really customized any of the reports there as much. So we use the list reports a lot. A lot of the groups will tend to download all the issue details or action details and then do their own reporting based off of that. And then we've got some very basic charts directly out of MetricStream. So this is not really, like I said, not really new, not customized either. So that's on the 5 Ws. How am I doing on time? I'm good? Okay, excellent. Good. So what about the people, right? And what about the process and the technology? So how did we achieve all of this is essentially what I'm trying to say here. It definitely takes you need the right people. It takes you need the right team, the right mix of skill sets. This is essentially a description of my team. We're a team of 3 people. I've got two people reporting to me. One is who I would consider a front-end subject matter expert. So this person knows the MetricStream user interface. They understand workflows. They understand sort of the business context. Who I would sort of delegate the product owner role of issues to. And then the other side that you have on the right-hand side, right-hand side for you, is my back-end subject matter expert. So this person is a database guru, right? They understand data models, they understand SQL, because we tap directly into MetricStream database for all of this reporting. So they understand how to mine the data. And they also have reporting skills, right? So they can build these Power BI reports that you saw. But really common sort of characteristics, which are very important, they both have had to be very curious. And what I mean by that is, when you have some downtime, open up MetricStream, open up the database, play around in the tool, try and understand how do components connect with each other. We're not big on reading a lot of user guides because you really learn through experience. And so I myself have spent countless hours in the database looking around and understanding what each field means, mapping it back to the front end, et cetera, and my team has done that as well. So curiosity is key. They should understand the process, right? If you don't understand the issue management process, you can't really relate the data to the right pieces in your reporting. And then they have to have, I borrowed this from development shops, right? You've got to have design thinking. You have to be able to put yourself in the shoes of your audience. And that will drive a lot of the decisions that we make around creating these reports. And lastly, customer focus, right? So you're creating the reports for an audience. If you don't have the audience in mind, it means it goes very much to the design thing. If you don't have the audience in mind, you're not going to build a report that's successful. Change management in terms of a process, like this is what I chose to pick on for the process. I don't want to talk about the development, how we get Power BI, et cetera, to work, but change management we found is critical, right? We have to have a lot of discipline, and we don't have that yet. We're getting there, right? We're constantly shining ourselves and saying we have to be really disciplined around change management. This is what our process looks like, right? Every change gets initiated. We've got requirements. We track that through to completion. I won't spend too much time on this, but on the left-hand side of the picture here, number 5 is really important, right? When you implement the change, engage the stakeholder or the change requester back and say, can you test this for me before I release it, right? And once they okay it, then you release it, and you start the cycle all over again. I realized I was between you guys and lunch, and so I put the slide just to torture you with the cake in the background. But my philosophy is layers are really good, right? And let me explain what I mean by that. The way we've architected our sort of reporting stack at DTCC, at least for issue management, is we've got the raw data, right? But we don't tap directly into the raw data because I don't know how many of you have actually opened up MetricStream's database and looked underneath the hood. Okay, I guess I'm the only one. I'm a data nerd here. But the issues table itself has like upwards of 50 fields probably that we don't use for reporting. There's a lot of it that's used internally to manage just the application and the workflows. So we're not going to look at the raw data for reporting. We probably use out of those, we probably use about 10 to 15 of the fields. And so that's really where the common data model comes into place, the middle piece here. You want to define what your reporting or data model should look like. So if it's these 12 fields that you need for producing your reporting, you want to be able to do that and not rely on people to tap into the raw data. Otherwise, you're really going to confuse people. And then the top piece is the reporting layer, which is actually alluding to what Ellen, I guess the gentleman here talked about, right? Is bring your own tools. We're saying we've built these assets in Power BI, right? We've built some of these reports in Power BI, but that doesn't mean that's what you have to go with. If you are another group that you want to do issue management reporting for your own line of business, bring your own tool. That's fine. This architecture is sort of scalable in that sense, right? You can plug into that common data model, and then I'm not worried that you're calling an issue something else, or you're reporting using the wrong field on these issues when you're using a different tool like Tableau or whatever it is, right? So we're all talking the same language. That's really why that middle layer is critical, right? And then, like I said, you can extend and use any tools on the top layer that you want to. Yes, sir. I love that you asked that question because I actually covered that in the lessons learned slide. And I'll kind of summarize it with this phrase, right? Build it and they will come. That's been our motto. The end users, quite honestly, we've had those conversations. They kind of know what they want, but they don't really know what they want until they see it. So that's been our philosophy, is just deliver the first cut. We can always go back and change it. And we actually are planning, for example, the self-service issue remediation that I showed you that goes to the senior management of the company. We are planning a phase 2 of that, which will be action focused, because once everyone saw the issue level, they're like, where's the actions one? I want to see the actions one, because that's what I need, right? So we started to get a lot more dialogue going once we built out the first cut. You're absolutely right. That's why you only saw 4 charts. That report or that self-service dashboard, CEO has access to that, but we only put 4 charts there. I wanted to put a lot more, but my boss was like, keep it down to 4. So I'm like, oh, more colors, more visuals. No, it doesn't work that way. That's not how it works. Yes?
A common data model scalable to a point where you can go for the next level reporting like trending and predictive analysis or analytics, or
Not yet.
because what I saw is just a reporting of a snapshot, but do you
Yes.
have that?
Yeah, absolutely. So great question. The question is, do we have trending, right? So I think to do trending and sort of look at how your, let's say, open issue counts change over time, et cetera, you need to have that history. That's very taxing on a data model like this. So our architecture right now, that raw data layer is directly MetricStream's database. If we were to start trying to do trending or AI on the database, we hit that so much that it causes performance issues on the front end. And so I think the intention here is when we eventually get there, we may want to segregate the data into a reporting platform, a dedicated warehouse, let's say, for reporting, and then we can start to capture, snapshots. We do actually currently, we do capture monthly snapshots, but it's not, at a granular level. Like, what did it look like yesterday versus today? We don't do that.
Sorry, one
Yes,
follow-up question. So do you have in your roadmap where you want to tie these issues or to risks, controls, and what?
Yeah,
and-
I'll talk about that actually in the last slide here, which is one of our kind of what's next, right, for us. So the way for us, one of the what's next pieces is integrating issues data with other data across the company, right, to be able to give you more background on the issues. So did this issue come from an incident? And what was it about the incident, right? What were some of the things that triggered the issue? And just trying to get more context around the issue itself. So yeah, a good question though. Anything else? Yes.
What about reporting to the board? I know
Sure.
you have all the monthly metrics and things, and
That goes directly to the board.
so which subcommittee, where does it get
Yeah.
reported?
Okay,
Audit
sure.
committee, risk committee,
Oh,
how
boy.
does that work?
I'm sweating now because that's what we end up doing a lot. The monthly paginated reports that you saw, they go to basically the audit committee at a minimum, and then we have a lot of subcommittees as well. So subcommittees don't care about the enterprise level data as much, right? They really care about their own focus and jurisdiction. Like if it's based on a legal entity, they'll focus on that legal entity. So we actually take a cut of those data points we cut them by legal entity, and in some cases by organization, or a combination of the two. So we have behind the scenes in Cognos a set of filters that will say, hey, just give me these charts, these exact charts for these 3 legal entities, because that's what I'm then going to use for the subcommittee reporting. But they are the exact same charts. So the benefit here is everyone's getting the same views, just customized to their area of jurisdiction.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So I thought we'll wrap up kind of by looking at some lessons learned. And quite honestly, the slide summary says it. We are still learning constantly. But some of the things we have seen, I mentioned this earlier, change management. I cannot stress this enough. It requires a lot of discipline. Data quality, gentleman mentioned it up here. If you have bad data, your reporting will be trash. Like, people are just going to toss it out. And you actually, not only that, but you lose credibility and you lose trust in the reporting. And so we actually have a lot of focus on data quality. And it's, in fact, one of our roadmap items is to start building out data quality as a self-service. So you can start to have reporting on, if you have any problems with your data, like let's say you didn't pick a legal entity to tie to an issue, it's going to flag it in this report that then people get visibility into and can remediate that, right, or fix it. End user training is very important. Definitely don't underestimate that. Because to the point someone made was, how do you know when multiple people are submitting issues? How do you know that everyone's doing it right? You really need to be able to get your end users on board and train them and ensure that they understand, the issue type field on this issue form in MetricStream is really a theme of issue, and you can only select one and not multiple. I mean, those are the sort of things that we have to constantly sort of train our end users in, right? We talk about language. So going back to sort of the technical version of this is that common data model, but really the plain English version is we all have to be talking the same language, right? If we're not, and we don't communicate what that same taxonomy or language is, then we're all in trouble, right? So, so I don't call an apple an orange and vice versa. And then I talked about the last one, which is build it and they would come. I mean, that's what we found. Like, our end users didn't exactly know what they want, but the first cut was good enough, and that's what we went with. So one of the things, just make sure I have the right slide. One of the things we have found, though, is at least for us, this journey was made a lot easier with an enterprise tool, right? And obviously, our enterprise tool is MetricStream. But having all the issues in one place made it a lot easier because we're not chasing, 30 different applications or whatever to get all the issues data in. They're all in one place, and they're all in the same format. So at the very least, it makes our job in reporting a lot easier. Awesome, thank you. So single platform definitely helps that way. And actually, the fact that we have a single platform across all risk functions is also important because when I get into sort of the next steps for us, you'll see it's really about integrating, not just looking at a silo of issues and actions, but can you now start to pull in loss events and incidents and things like that to enrich your issue and action reporting. And the fact that you have a single platform, you really do have a single version of the truth, right? Nobody is looking at it any different way than what you present in a single platform. There we go. So what's next for us? We've got a few different areas, right? So one is to expand. I talked a little bit about, I showed you our monthly reporting, right? That process takes us 5 business days and a whole lot of hair pulling to get the reports out the door because we have to constantly make sure the data is right and ensure that we've got the right people on the distributions, et cetera. I mean, it's a nightmare. In fact, we're going through it right now. Our report's due on Wednesday, and my team member started on Saturday. So I've been following emails on the side, making sure everything's okay. But we want to expand to self-service, right? We believe that's really where the bang for the buck is. And that way people can actually go in and look at your own cut of data. You look at it when you want to, and we're not really just shoving it down your throats and saying, yeah, this is what it is. I don't think we'll ever really do away with the monthly process, but we might scale it back a lot. Because we can't really, from a regulatory standpoint, for example, we can't really give regulators self-service access, so what we would do is probably still provide the monthly reports to regulators, but maybe the enterprise would go self-service. So that's really our expand piece. Simplifying, so you've seen a lot of the reporting that I talked about. What I didn't mention is we still have a lot of focus on actions and getting actions done. But we need to start to transform to a culture of issue remediation because, so the way I see it is issues are nothing but a project. And an actions underneath that, that's your project plan. Those are your tasks to get the issue resolved. And so why do we care about what tasks you need to get the issue resolved? Why not just look at the issue as a whole and say, okay, did you actually do where did you remediate or did you mitigate the risk sufficiently enough so that we can close this issue out? So from a reporting standpoint, we've been very focused on action level reporting. And it's only recently, so when I talked about the KPIs in the beginning, it's only recently that we started to really shift away from action level and more to the issue level. So all our KPIs that are actually truly measuring or used for compensation reporting and stuff is more at the issue level now. That's a very recent change. So the next piece was just integrating, I mentioned that, enriching your issues with data points from other parts of the company as well as from other modules or apps in MetricStream. And the last one was interesting is how do we evolve this, right? So this is still a little ways out, but issues and actions are a treasure trove of text data. You can, issues have descriptions, right? Actions have descriptions. So we've also actually had these conversations here at the summit around how do we bring machine learning and artificial intelligence into the mix, right? So some of the ideas that we've been toying with are, can we look at the issue and action attributes and can we start to, so I put in here NLP, which is natural language processing, and text mining, and semantic clustering. That's all just fancy words. What that means is, I'll give you a scenario. if you want to understand, you have a group of issues and you want to start to understand what are the major themes that these issues can fall under. And is there an emerging risk that we don't know about yet, but there are issues that are starting to flow under that theme? The technology is there today, or the capabilities are there today for the machine to be able to read the issue description and understand it and bucket them into clusters so that you can start to say, you know what, this set of issues is related to cybersecurity. This year is market risk. This year is risk X. We don't really know about. And guess what? There's a pretty big population here, and they're high and moderate rated issues. What's going on? Let's identify that and let's drill into it. So technology is there. We're not. So we have to, that's one of our next steps, is to be able to mine that data. Yes, sir. Yes.
You related the issue to a project.
Yes.
It's the same way we kind of see it. Have you been able to figure out, so if you've got multiple action owners and one action is dependent on another action and that first action gets delayed, how are you notifying the second action owner that they're going to be delayed too because it's the first one?
Good question. So oftentimes those action owners tend to be within the same organization, and at least in our case. So we haven't really come across, or they'll sort of sort it out amongst themselves. We do report on past dues, and it's pretty transparent as to which actions are past their due date and they're still open. And so if you are, let's say you were an action owner and you're dependent on something else preceding, you'll typically get that in our reporting that, hey, this action is past due and you're going to be affected. What we kind of try and do is we leave it to the action owners to sort that out. We're a reporting function. We report the data as is, but it's really the action owners, and then in a lot of cases the issue owner, right? Because that's an officer of the company, might see that, hey, this action is delayed. It's going to have a downstream impact, and so they kind of also get involved and raise the alarms. Any other questions? Yes.
Throwing around with that is when that action owner requests a due date extension on his action, to send, and if it gets approved, then send a notification to the other action owners at that time to alert them to see if they need to adjust their dates.
Right? That's a good idea. I mean, I would say some of the other features that we've seen, because that would, I think, be a customization, right, to send an additional notification. But some of the other features are, for example, if you set up the workflow, which out of the box, I think you can set up the workflow to have an issue owner approval and then an action approver. You can set up some things like that so that you actually have other people involved in the approval process. That could be an option too. Yeah. Good stuff. Yes, Susan.
Your point on the evolution coming is really great, and you kind of set the stage for Andy's talk tomorrow, where they're going to actually show some work that they've done in the lab on this semantics and natural language processing around issues and actions. So
Absolutely, that's good.
it'll be something you can,
Yeah, I'm excited to hear that as well.
yeah. We'll sign you up for the next beta.
Sure. All right. Any other questions?
So,
No?
if there's no other questions, Arpit, I want to just thank you.
Sure.
I think this was great. I'd like to invite you and everyone else here to an MSIG at 2:50 tomorrow. It's from Peanut Bannister. He's formerly from Fannie Mae. It's the Raise Your Hand program that some of us might have heard of it earlier. So I think it's really goes down this a little deeper, and you might be interested, and probably everyone else in this room. So
Good. Okay.
it'll be a good one.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everyone for the time. Appreciate it.